Well, I have to be honest with you this morning. I'm not very happy giving this sermon today because I really don't like that text from 2 Thessalonians. You ever heard a preacher say something like that? I mean, Paul sounds like he's nagging, and no one likes a nag. He's calling on all of us to pull our own weight. He's gone from preaching to meddling in this text, and he's certainly frustrated with many folks in the Thessalonian church who are just kind of coasting along. Now, maybe they're this way because they have heard him talk so much about the grace of God that you can't earn, because that would be salvation by works. And so they have just decided they're just going to coast into heaven. And we understand today there are a lot of things that are free outdoor concerts, public radio, public TV. You don't have to pay for it. You can go to the museum, you can go to all kinds of places and not have to pay. We understand that. And yet, we need to remember in our city or in our nation that we need to pull our own weight. And this term, pulling our own weight, comes from both farming and nautical background. The farming has to do with 2 oxen or 4 oxen or some horses that are yoked together and each one has to pull its own weight. Or from the nautical background where sailors had to pull the ropes. If you've ever been on someone's sailboat and they didn't have a crew and you had to do some work yourself, pulling the jibs or the mainsails or whatever all those different terms are, you know you had a responsibility. Back in the day, when the sailors didn't pull their own weight, they were pitched over to the side to the sharks, or they were whipped with cat-o'-nine tails. That's not something we want to continue today. But this is true of a rowing team, if you think for a moment, like in the Olympics. We had a senior officer come and do some consulting for us at the seminary, and she was bringing out Jim Collins' Good to Great and talking about you got to get the right persons in the right places on the bus. And I said, wait a minute, that analogy doesn't work, because it doesn't matter where anyone sits on the bus. That person makes no difference to the direction the bus is going or the speed of that bus. You should use a rowing team. And she said, you're right, I'm going to change what I say about how we organize ourselves. We are called to pull our own weight. Now think for a moment about children who have not left to go off to college and they're just living with free room and board. Do they pull their own weight? Do they participate around the house in some way or another? Or relatives who come to visit for 3 or 4 days, do they participate? Do they help out a little bit? Was it Dorothy Parker or Benjamin Franklin who said that relatives who stay 3 or 4 days are like fish and begin to smell after a while? Who was it who said that? I can't remember. Do spouses pull their own weight? Had a woman in one of my churches before come up to me right before the service and said, Dr. Carl, I've got one for you. And I said, what? And she said, you know the line about give a man a fish and he can eat for a day, and teach a man to fish and he can eat for a lifetime? And I said, yes, cautiously. And she said, well, I heard a variation on that. I said, really? What is it? She said, give a man a fish and he can eat for a day, teach a man to fish, and he can get out of the house for the whole weekend. It's really great. Now, we are all called to pull our own weight. In dog culture, particularly the Huskies, this is really challenging. We went on a dog sled ride up in Colorado a few years ago, and it was so quiet and so beautiful going through the snow, and just hear the dogs barking every once in a while. And before we started, I asked the driver, I said, is there a culture here? He said, oh, yeah. Oh, there's a definite culture. There's an alpha dog, who will only be in the front. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, the view's better from there. And then he said, there is a nurturer. And then I said, what about someone a dog that doesn't pull his own weight? Do you ever have that? He said, oh, yeah, happens every once in a while. I said, well, what happens? He said, well, when I disconnect the rest of the dogs, they beat the hell out of the one who didn't do anything. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And he said, Dr. Carl, do not use that at the church. It's just not a good route to go. But what Paul is doing is almost saying that in this text in 2 Thessalonians. He's saying we all need to examine ourselves and whether or not we're pulling our own weight to the glory of God, Or are we just living on what others have already done before us? Deuteronomy 6 talks about that. We live in a house that others provided, and yet we enjoy it. We drink from cisterns we did not dig. We eat from vineyards we did not plant. No, we are not really pulling our own weight sometimes. Sometimes we're just freeloaders. We're just on the dole, on the grace of God. But God is calling us to participate. Now, some people will hear this text and interpret it the wrong way. They will think it's referring to anybody who's at a soup kitchen, who isn't working and can't work and they have to go get food. I don't think that's at all what Paul is talking about, because I've worked with soup kitchens many, many times, and I know the statistics. Many of them have mental and social problems, and they're there for those reasons. No, I think Paul is actually reversing it and saying those of us who have more need to pick up the slack and do a little bit more to help those. We may actually be the freeloaders in this story. And our young people understand this. I wish you could have been there last Monday night. Beautiful report from our own young people about the grants they're ready to recommend to the IPC Foundation. Their site visits were incredible. They were so mature. I loved hearing their reports. They understand how God has a special predilection for the poor and wants us to reach out. So don't work, don't eat is not about welfare. It is not what you might think it is. It's about all of us pulling our own weight to help those who are in need. This is not my house, it's not your house, it's the Lord's house, and we all have a responsibility. Now, here's where the problem comes for me, and one of the reasons I really want to give this sermon, because when you're working on it, and you suddenly realize that Paul has said, hey, I work too, and I did this, and I did that, I suddenly realized, what am I doing? I work here, yeah, but what am I doing to volunteer? What am I doing to help out beyond just the job I have as senior pastor of this church? And I was convicted by this text. So I marched myself right down to Evelyn Puckett's office and signed up to be a stair tutor. Now, I had to resuscitate her because she nearly fainted when I said this, and then she turned to me and she said, well, Dr. Carl, you know you have to go through training. Oh, yes, of course, and I know that. We are all called to participate, whatever place we find ourselves. Henry Edmonds, our founding pastor, said it beautifully. He put it this way: we do not find God in study or thought or argument or searching old books, but in living. And the reason is that religion is not a philosophy, but a practice. It is not a theory, but a life. And God is not a proposition, but a person, not a concept, but a comrade. God does not yield to analysis. God joins us by the wayside, as he did the two on the road to Emmaus, and was made known in the breaking of the bread. And be careful about that interpretation also, because don't eat, don't work, don't eat could mean, well, if you don't do good deeds, you don't get to come to the table and share in the Lord's Supper. No, that's not what it means. In fact, the Lord's Supper is free. It is free grace to everyone who professes faith in Jesus Christ. And we are called to come to this table, and once we experience that grace, then we do good deeds in response to the grace. That's the way the theology should go. Otherwise, it's salvation by works. Which means that Paul would side with both the Marys and the Marthas in our churches. First, the Marys that some people think are slackers, because Martha says, you need to help out in the kitchen. You need to, do some work in the house here. No, work includes prayer and Bible study, particularly when it's intentional, as Mary did, sitting at the foot of Jesus. No, we are all called to pray. In fact, the power of prayer is very important. I'm thankful for monastic communities. I've spent some time at St. Meinrad Monastery in Indiana with the monks doing the hours. It's hard work to pray for the world if you're a monk or a nun, and I'm thankful for them. And it's something we all can do. Sometimes the homebound, the shut-ins will say to me, Dr. Carl, I don't even know why I'm still here. What can I do? I said, you could pray. Prayer is very important. It's very powerful. Some people really believe in the power of prayer. Paul certainly did, and he said you should pray constantly in 1 Thessalonians 5. He wants you to keep praying all the time. In fact, we should all be praying. All of IPC should be praying for rain right now. We need rain. Let's pray for it. Everyone in the congregation. Prayer is very important. There are some people who really believe it. I had a woman in church I served before who wanted to get everyone to pray for her sick friend. She was just calling everyone. She called Crystal Cathedral to get her sick friend put on the prayer list, but she got a wrong number. So she talked the person on the wrong number, and it was like Nancy Skinner tries to convert wrong numbers if she gets them on the phone. And this woman said, well, do you believe in prayer? And the man said, of course I do. And she said, well, you need to pray for my sick friend. And he said, all right, I will. Prayer is incredibly important. In fact, what we're doing right here in this place, being still and knowing that God is God. We have devotions before our all-staff meetings every Tuesday morning, and different staff members do it. And a couple of weeks ago, Catherine Goudreau did it, and it was beautiful. It was so moving that we didn't even want to go on with the meeting after it was over. We had to just kind of be quiet for a little bit. And I said, isn't that a nice break from the news and the emails and the Twitter and the Facebook and all the nonsense that's just to have a break? And to remember that when we come here on Sunday morning, whether it's 8:45 or 11, or you come on Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock, this is the main thing. Not the nonsense that we get ourselves caught up in and worrying about everything. God has gathered us here for a purpose, to pray. But Paul also understands that the Marthas are important. So, pulling your own weight not only means praying, it also means doing something in the community, doing something as part of the community, participating in some way, doing what is right, what is morally and ethically right and correct. Paul says that at the very end of the 2 Thessalonians passage. With every ounce of your being, do not weary in doing the right thing. I heard about a builder who was building houses for years for this owner of a construction company, and he worked so hard, and he always did such impeccable work on these houses that the construction CEO never complimented him and never said anything nice to him. So he said, I'm going to get him this time. I'm going to take a lot of shortcuts and have slipshod work. It'll be terrible. And he built a house. And the construction CEO came around and said, I've never really said thank you to you. And I just want you to know, I want you to have the house you just built. Miller Gorey really laughed at that one. Doing the right thing is what we are called to do. Not part of the time. Not every once in a while. But all the time. And understanding how to listen and live with people with whom you disagree. This country was founded constitutionally on the idea that people with whom we disagree are actually our friends. Maybe loyal opposition, but they are not our enemies. And I'm thankful that I am a part of a church, IPC, that understands this. This is a very diverse congregation, and yet this congregation knows how to listen and pay attention to each other. And by that, you are modeling for the whole community of Birmingham and for this nation how to do that. So I'm thankful for that. Not because you're better persons in one way or another, but theologically because you understand that we are all in Christ. That Christ is in you, the hope of glory. That's the only way you'll be able to listen to someone with whom you disagree. Last Sunday was very moving. I think it's one of the most moving services at this church where the choir chants the names of our dear loved ones and friends who've gone on to be with Jesus in the past year. I don't know, it hit me in a special way last week, you know. Maybe it's because I'm getting older or because I've now been here a year and a quarter and I've gotten to know so many of these people, but I had a lump in my throat and a tear in my eye as I listened to those names chanted by our choir. And then I thought about each one and what great models they were for pulling their own weight, calling on us to do the same. And actually, you know how to do this. So instead of fussing at you the way Paul does the Thessalonians, today I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything every one of you does. It's beautiful. Now, I have to make a confession. I really don't know how to finish this sermon, and this is not a very good thing for a preacher to say because it might go on and on forever. But John Calvin always ended his sermons with, "I have talked long enough, and now I'm going to stop." And that was the end because the stenographer took it down. But I literally have no idea how to finish this sermon. So you're going to have to help me. You're going to have to finish this sermon with your actions and with your lives. And may God bless you as you continue to pull your own weight to the glory of God from this day forth and forevermore. God bless you all.